Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Would those on our floor and our guests in the gallery please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Pastor Kevin Walker of Calvary Church of the Nazarene in Charleston, West Virginia, and then please remain standing as we are led in the pledge this morning by the Senator from Greenbrier, Pastor Walker.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come unto you in prayer, you most gracious and loving Heavenly Father. God, we praise you for this day, Lord. We thank you for an opportunity that we have to, Father, gather, Father, here this morning. And God, we just praise you, Father, for all the many good things you've given us, Lord, from traveling mercies, Lord. Father, we just pray this morning, Father, that you would just give us knowledge, give us wisdom this day. Lord, we pray, Father, as this Senate meets today, Lord, that, Father, you would just give them, Father, the wisdom they need, Father, for the day. God, we just pray that, Father, you would just, Father, just lead them, guide them in the ways of truth and in the ways of righteousness, God. Lord, we know that, Father, you're worthy of our praise, you're worthy of our glory. Father, we love you this morning and we praise you for which is in the wonderful and matchless name of Jesus. We pray and ask. And amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Senator from Greenbrier County.
Will you please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to
You may be seated. Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, February 20th, 2018.
The senator from Preston County requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guests. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest of the senator from Ohio, we have Aaron Snyder. As guest of the senator from Berkeley, we have Alexander Cross and Max Haynes. As guest of the senator from Tucker, we have Brooke Lance. As guest of the senator from Boone, Brady Pinson, Madison Griffith. As guest of the senator from Harrison, Emma Ryan and Camden Southern. And as guest of the senator from Kanawha, we have Hunter Hill. That's the senior senator from the 8th guest. As guest of the senator from Preston, Jacob Gray. And as guest of the senior senator from the 15th, Nathaniel Hutchison. And as guest of the senator from Raleigh, Kylie Stone. Some are in the rear of our gallery. If all would stand in the Senate, make them welcome. Please be seated. Further introductions. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joining my page in the, on behalf of the senator from Brooke, my page, Aaron Snyder, his mother, Amber Snyder, I believe, is in the gallery. If she would stand and the Senate make her welcome.
The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of your pages today, Hunter Hill, is our very own Kay Hill's grandson. So, Kay, we're glad to have him here, and thank you for letting your grandson Paige. Also seated in the North Gallery is Brian Thompson. He's here today for Aviation Day at the Capitol, and he's currently a captain with NetJets and a board member of the State Aeronautics Commission. He's been a neighbor of mine for all the years we were growing up. We rode the school bus together, going to Wayne schools. He had a great uncle by the name of Ford Thompson, who was a local businessman. He was into flying, and I'm sure that's probably nearly 100% of the reason why Brian got in the aeronautics field. He's been a pilot for years. And Sen, if you will, join me and make him welcome.
The junior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the North Gallery with us today is Randy Barrett. He's the mayor of the great city of Winfield, and with him are several key employees from the city of Winfield. If they would stand and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions, the senator from Wyoming County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us On behalf of myself and Senator Arvon of the 9th District, I would like to honor students from Wyoming East High School, Cameron Cook and Brianna Stevens. The Honorary Secretary of State's program recognizes these students for being active in registering eligible 17, 18-year-old students to vote. They are part of the group that have collectively organized more than 100 voter registration drives and registering 13,688 eligible seniors in 2017. I'm very proud of these students, and they are the future of West Virginia. Please stand and give them a warm welcome.
The senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Logan, we're very pleased to have the chaperones of our students from Duval Elementary and Middle School here, Tyler Woolwine and Chris Pinson. If they would stand and the Senate make them welcome.
The senior senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The junior senator from the 16th and I are very pleased to have the chaperones of our pages here today. If Tim Cross and Kendra Goldsboro, if they would stand and receive a warm Senate welcome.
The senator from Raleigh County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the page that the senior senator from the 9th and I have today, Ms. Stone, we have in the gallery escorting her, if they would stand and be recognized, James Stone and Gavin Stone. I ask you to give them a warm welcome.
Senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Becky and Bob Hutchinson and their sister Maggie please stand? They're the mother and father of our page Nathaniel, and that's on behalf of the senator from Morgan and myself, as well as the senior senator from the 16th and the junior senator from the 16th as well. Would the Senate please make them welcome?
Senator from Harrison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure and that of my senior senators, sir, from Braxton and yours, to introduce Janet and Chris Southern, who's the parents of our page, Camden Southern here. This is their second trip down here, and we sure appreciate them taking the time to bring him down here. Thank you.
The senator from Greenbrier County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Rowe, we're happy to have with us one of our constituents today, Libby Akers. If she'll please stand and the Senate make her feel welcome.
Further introductions? Further introductions. Communications from the House. Oh, excuse me. Senator from Tucker County.
That's the problem being over here in the corner, Mr. President. On behalf of the senior senator from the 14th and myself, we'd like to welcome our page Brooke Lance. Her parents are in the gallery. If they would stand, Tracy and Perry Lance, and the members make them welcome.
Senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Tucker and myself, we're pleased to have with us the chaperone of our page, Jacob Gray. Seated in the President's Gallery, his mother, Crystal Gray. Would you please stand and be recognized, and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions? Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4001 relating to eligibility and fraud requirements for public assistance.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4042 redefining school zone to facilitate placement of school zone signs.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4157, eliminating the refundable exemption for road construction contractors.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Finance.
Engrossed House Bill 4285, relating to the West Virginia Safe Mortgage Licensing Act.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Finance.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4304, creating the Board of Nursing.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Engrossed House Bill 4324 relating to the employment of individuals by municipal paid fire departments under civil service.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Judiciary.
Engrossed House Bill 4379, supplementing, amending, decreasing, and increasing items of the existing appropriations to the Department of Transportation.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on Government Organization, Finance. Message be received and referred to Committee on Finance.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4401, relating to the registration of business.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Government Organization.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4428, allowing training hours earned through public school education or apprenticeship to count towards an applicant's occupational certification.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Education.
Engrossed House Bill 4436, clarifying when a minor between the ages of 16 and 18 may be employed by or elected as a member of a volunteer fire department.
Message be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Engrossed House Bill 4488, relating to the Hatfield-McCoy Recreation Authority.
Message be received and referred to Committee on the Judiciary.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4522, allowing certain tax information to be shared with the Director of Purchasing Division, Department of Administration, and State Auditor.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Finance.
Engrossed House Bill 4622, relating to authorizing legislative rules regarding higher education.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Education. Further communications from the House?
No, sir.
Communications from the Executive?
There are none.
Reports from standing committees?
Your Committee on Natural Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 148, permitting surface owners purchase mineral interests when they become subject to tax lien, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the bill's double committee reference will be referred to Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration Senate Bill 344, requiring DOH implement program to recycle surplus metal supplies, materials, and equipment, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Gregory L. Boso, Chair.
Report will be received and referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Natural Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 536, allowing foster and adoptive children obtain lifetime hunting, fishing, and trapping license within 2 years of placement, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report will be received and referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration the following resolutions naming bridges: Senate Concurrent Resolution 2, Senate Concurrent Resolution 12, Senate Concurrent Resolution 14, Senate Concurrent Resolution 15, and Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each be adopted. Respectfully submitted, Gregory L. Boso, Chair.
Reports will be received. The Senator from Nicholas County.
Mr. President, I move request unanimous consent that the resolutions be taken up for immediate consideration, all considered simultaneously and placed upon their adoption.
Senator from Nicholas County moves that the resolutions be taken up for immediate. Ask unanimous consent that the resolutions be taken up for immediate considerations, all considered simultaneously and placed upon their adoption. Is there discussion? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the motion adopted. Resolutions. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills.
There are none.
Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 32 by Senators Beach, Baldwin, Clements, Facemeyer, Jeffries, Ojeda, Palumbo, Romano, Rucker, Smith, Stallings, Plymel, and Klein, recognizing the importance of industrial hemp.
Senator from Ohio, or Senator from Monongalia County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and to be put upon its adoption.
Senator from Monongalia County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 32, recognizing the importance of industrial hemp.
Question before Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Monongalia County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have in front of you, the short title for the resolution is a little misleading. Actually, it does one very important thing. It allows us to begin conversations with other states in regards to developing a compact around hemp. And we heard yesterday from the senator from Preston County the pieces of the puzzle we're trying to put together to get hemp moving forward. This may be very well may be the last piece of the puzzle, may be the most significant piece. It allows us to create a compact with the states, and we have a process we have to go through. This is the first process. This allows us to take the lead on this issue and help develop a piece of legislation that will be crafted in those states who wish to participate. We develop a policy later on this year. We get that approved by the Council of States, and then from that a work group is developed, a piece of legislation is crafted, and we bring it back to each of our states for approval. The idea is to send a message to D.C. that we want to be able to move hemp across state lines. Right now we can grow hemp and we can grow as much as we want, but we can't move it outside our state's borders to other states for them to use it, and vice versa. So this begins that dialogue and it begins that legislation. The final piece of that is the approval by Congress. We send that legislation forward once we pass it, and I anticipate that we could do this next session, pass the legislation, send the message to Congress to take this up for consideration for approval. Compacts are very rare, I'll tell you that right now. We may get 9 a year that's passed across the United States. So it's a lengthy process, minimum of 18 months to move it forward. But again, I believe it's a crucial piece of the puzzle, maybe the most important piece of the puzzle to allow us to have interstate commerce with regards to hemp. And I ask for your assistance. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Not. The question before the Senate is adoption of resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The Senator clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 33 by Senators Smith, Seipolt, Plymel, and Stallings, naming the William Bill Thurman King Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 47 by Senators Swope, Plymel, Klein, Stallings, Prezioso, Boso, and Romano, designating February 21st, 2018 as West Virginia Aviation Day.
Senator from Mercer County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be, tell me the rest of the word, taken up for immediate adoption, committee references dispensed with, and the resolution put upon its adoption.
Yep. Senator from Mercer County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 47 designating February 21st, 2018 as West Virginia Aviation Day.
Question before the Senate is adoption of resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Mercer County.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a general aviation pilot, it's my honor to rise in favor of this resolution. I think everybody's pretty familiar with commercial aviation, but may not be aware of the impact and the importance of general aviation. To illustrate those points, there are approximately 8,000 general aviation airports in the U.S. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with $1 billion in West Virginia alone contributing to our economy. I'm sure our senators from the Eastern Panhandle and from North Central West Virginia can certainly speak to how important it is to their areas. We have also an Air National Guard unit right here in Charleston, which is extremely important. One of the things that may go unnoticed about general aviation is how important it is to our national security. Whenever there's a natural disaster of any kind, whether you're talking about the hurricanes in Texas or earthquake in Haiti or the hurricane damage in Puerto Rico, general aviation pilots all step up and fly hundreds, if not thousands, of missions to rescue people, to bring food and supplies into distressed areas. And if you haven't thought about it, often those disasters damage all other forms of transportation. And general aviation always steps up and fills that gap and fills a very critical national need. I urge adoption of the resolution.
Further discussion? The senator from Harrison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to stand with my senator from Mercer in support of this resolution. You know, you've often heard me say here on the floor that we spend a lot of time chasing ghosts, trying to change things that make no difference in West Virginia. You know, our two big problems in West Virginia are the things we love the most are mountains and the lack of people, the lack of population. But if you look for our strengths, you know, we can make those strengths even greater. And aviation in West Virginia is one of those strengths. It doesn't require a mile-long flat section of ground to build a huge factory on. They're compact, they move easy, and they really are a tremendous benefit to the state. I didn't know anything about aviation 14 years ago. I thought aviation was those big silver planes with the double engines on them that we used to fly back and forth when we were kids and that disappeared with deregulation. But getting on the airport authority in central West Virginia in Harrison County and Marion County taught me a lot. Aviation's about a lot of things. It's the hub of activity in a lot of our communities. It is where I'm from. It's education in Martinsburg and in Bridgeport, where we're educating young people who graduate on a Friday and go to work on a Monday. And I'm not talking about minimum wage jobs. I'm talking about jobs where they start out $45,000 with benefits and move up immediately if they do what they need to do. It's about jobs. In north central West Virginia, we have almost 2,000 jobs in our airport. I didn't know that when I got there. And that's just amazing. It's about economic development. It's about creating a better life for West Virginia. In Harrison County, the airport hub generates almost $1 billion in economic activity every year, and it's going up. It is my honor, sir, to stand and recommend with great enthusiasm the support and passage of this resolution.
Further discussion. Senator from Monongalia County.
Unanimous consent that the comments by the gentleman from Mercer and the gentleman from Harrison be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Further discussion? Not. The question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess to present the resolution.
The senator from Ohio County moves that the Senate stand in brief recess to present the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. The senator from Wayne County.
Request unanimous consent that the remarks by the senator from Monongalia as it relates to SCR 32 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Further resolutions.
Senate Resolution 48 by Senators Carmichael, Mr. President, Drennan, Plymel, and Stallings, celebrating the 150th anniversary of Winfield.
The junior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
The junior senator from the 4th requests unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with, the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 48, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the city of Winfield, West Virginia.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The junior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure and yours to support this resolution celebrating the 150th anniversary of the city of Winfield. Winfield is the county seat of Putnam and began to grow when Charles Brown began a ferry crossing at Winfield, which increased travel and business opportunities. In the 1930s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers proposed a lock system on the Kanawha River, and the Winfield locks were built along with a hydroelectric power plant on the southern portion of the locks. All that history is important, but Winfield today is much more than the river and the locks. It's home to more than 2,300 West Virginians. That's up from 900 in 1986 when I was a student at Winfield High School. If you ask anyone about Winfield, I'm sure that they will talk about the outstanding schools. I can attest to that now. This year's Milken Teacher of the Year, National Teacher of the Year, is from Winfield Middle School. Many businesses are located in Winfield, including the iconic Dairy Freeze. I recommend the General Burger and the pumpkin roll if you get down that way. Roy Cole Sports and Gunther's Screen Printing, just among many of the businesses that are now located in downtown Winfield. I urge adoption.
Further discussion? The senior senator from the 6th.
Also, I'm pretty proud of Winfield. It's the home of the West Virginia Drag Racing Hall of Fame, which I've been involved with all my life. There's actually 2 drag strips that were within a few miles of there, probably the closest two in West Virginia. My dad raced at the one near the town of Winfield, and I raced at the one down at Southside. So Winfield's pretty special to me. I appreciate this resolution.
Further discussion? Not. Question before the Senate is adoption of resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent that the remarks by the senior senator from the 6th be printed in the appendix of the journal. And the junior senator from the 4th, I'm sorry.
The senator from Ohio County requests unanimous consent that the remarks by the junior senator from the 4th and senior senator from the 6th be printed in the appendix of the journal. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess to present the resolution.
Senator from Ohio County moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purposes of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. Further resolutions?
Yes, sir. Senate Resolution 49 by Senators Stallings, Plymel, Klein, Prezioso, and Boso, designating March 11th through the 17th, 2018 as Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week.
The Senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Senator from Boone County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 49, designating March 11th through the 17th, 2018 as Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution designates March 11th through the 17th as Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week. We know that MS is a neurological disease of the central nervous system affecting 2.3 million people worldwide. And the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, the West Virginia chapter, says that there are more than 3,000 West Virginians living with this disease, and it generally strikes people in the prime of their life, between the ages of 20 and 50. And the cause and course of this debilitating disease remains unknown, and no cure currently exists. However, the National MS Society has been committed for more than 70 years to a world free of MS, heightening public knowledge and insight into the disease, and contributing heavily to research, more than $900 million in groundbreaking research, and $42.1 million funding 380 research projects currently at the best medical centers, universities in the country and abroad. We want to stop MS in its tracks, restoring what's been lost and ending MS forever. That's the mission of the National MS Society, and one that all Americans in West Virginia should support. I have a couple MS patients, and of course, again, their disease progression varies greatly. One in particular is a dear friend of mine. He played basketball with me, and I know him well. I visit him at his home on occasion, but he basically has to be lifted now, and his quality of life has really been impacted. So I certainly urge adoption of the resolution.
Further discussion, the Senator from Cabell County.
Thank you. I'll be brief, but as a body, you've learned that the four trial or lawyers that we have in here rarely suffer from any lack of confidence. And so we project how smart we are on a regular basis around here, and you know that. But the last case I tried in circuit court in Logan County, my adversary is at the front of the line here. That'd be Mr. Dwayne Regier, who took me to the woodshed. Dwayne, I haven't tried a case since then, okay? So I stand in favor of the resolution.
Further discussion? Further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the resolution adopted. The Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent that remarks by the Senator from Boone and the Senator from Cabell be put in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess to present the resolution.
Senator from Ohio County moves the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Further resolutions?
Yes, sir. Senate Resolution 50 by Senators Seipold, Plymel, Klein, Stallings, Prezioso, and Boso, designating February 21, 2018 as West Virginia Local Foods Day.
Senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, the committee references dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption.
Senator from Preston County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 50, designating February 21, 2018 as West Virginia Local Foods Day.
Question for the Senate is adoption of resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the Senate. This resolution is really about being healthy. The West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition, West Virginia Farmers Market Association, and some other organizations have formed an alliance. And many times we see policies driven from the top down in our state, but this is truly a bottom-up. It's a grassroots effort. And some of the objectives that this alliance have is that they like to study the positive effects of locally grown foods and the positive effects of local agriculture to the communities. They find and develop marketing opportunities for those farmers and those products. They like to incubate and help assist those beginning farmers get off the ground and get their products to market. And they advocate, most importantly, for public policy, which is supportive of all these points that I mentioned before. In the past 50 years or so, manufactured food has become increasingly popular. And it's easy to see why. Because it's inexpensive, it's readily available, and more importantly, it fills you up. You eat it and you're full. But without the proper diet, a person, even though they feel full, they might not be getting the proper nutrition they need. And there's a connection, Mr. President, between poor nutrition and certain chronic conditions, such as diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, and hypertension. So West Virginia, having a pretty poor track record with health outcomes, I think it's very appropriate for us to appreciate and recognize the efforts of these organizations through the Alliance to bring local foods into our grocery stores and into the homes of our citizens. Mr. President, I urge adoption of the resolution.
Further discussion? Senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Local foods, I didn't appreciate until most recently we took a little trip up into the New England states. What I found interesting is how many restaurants in those areas promote local food use. And they do that by saying your vegetables today came from XYZ. And I thought it was interesting. And so I recognize the vital importance that local foods have on the local economy, but more importantly, how important they are to the good nutrition of our children, our seniors, and for those around us. I urge adoption of this resolution.
Further discussion? Not. The question before the Senate is adoption of resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent the remarks by the Senator from Preston and the Senator from Nicholas be put in the appendix to the Journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Further resolutions?
No, sir.
Motions? Petitions?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
There is none.
Bills on third reading?
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 477 relating to 5-year sunset on tax credits and incentives. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 477 sunsets new tax credit created under Chapter 11 after 5 years unless the bill creating the new tax credit has its own sunset provision with a different time period. In addition, Senate Bill 477 provides that any tax credits that currently exist is amended in the future, that the amendment must provide for the 5-year sunsetting of the law creating a tax credit unless the original law has its own sunsetting provision. I will take any questions, and I urge passage, Mr. President.
Further discussion? The senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just would the chairman yield?
Does the senator yield? Senator does yield.
I'm ready.
I just want to be certain of what we're doing here. So if a bill becomes law and next year the legislature passes a tax credit bill that doesn't have a sunset date in it, this bill will take effect that they have 5 years on that, right?
Correct. Then it would automatically have that 5-year sunset built into it, so we have to come back and take a look back. It's a look back.
Okay, I know there are bills now with tax credits in them. So if a bill has a tax credit in it, do they automatically get a 5-year extension?
No. There would be no look back for current tax credits unless we went in and amended the bill and or done something legislatively into past legislation where we changed that section of the code. Then that's when the 5-year sunset would kick in unless there was language and that said otherwise.
So if it was a 3-year tax credit, this is
correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further bills on third reading?
No, sir.
Bills on second reading?
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 412 relating to authority of county litter control officers. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 474 requiring that certain documents filed pursuant to West Virginia Jobs Act, which include records of wages, be considered confidential. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 522 relating generally to Administrative Procedures Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 523 relating to tax treatment of pollution control facilities and wind power projects. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 543 relating to confidentiality of medical records. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 626 relating generally to coal mining. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4142 providing certain employees of the Division of Corrections, Division of Juvenile Services, and West Virginia Regional Jail and Correctional Facility Authority a salary adjustment.
Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent to bill I over 1 day, retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Further bills on second reading?
No, sir.
Bills on first reading. Senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Requesting unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered as having been read and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guest. Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senator from Wetzel and Senator from Marshall, we have in the gallery a former head of the West Virginia Education Association, Charlie DeLauder, if he would stand.
Further introductions? Further introductions? Remarks by members of the Senate. The Senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a special day here for someone here from Wayne County. It's his birthday, and I recommend that we sing happy birthday to him. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Senator. Happy birthday to you.
Senior Senator from the 5th.
Ask unanimous consent to address the Senate.
We're under remarks. Senator may proceed.
You all don't even know what they said here when it wasn't Bob. It was something you don't want to repeat, you know. Thank you all very much. I dislike this very much. I do not like doing this. But the only reason that the senator from Boone is the one that got up to say this, there's another person out here that's on public radio, you know, and does a call-in show during that in a week turns the same age as I do. I think living in the Eastern Panhandle was tough on Hoppy Kercheval because I think I look younger than he does. But the senator from Boone in 2 months turns the same age, so he always likes to rub it in when he does this.
Further remarks? Further remarks. The senior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. There aren't many icons in our, you know, I've lived a long life, longer than most in here. And as I look back, I think, what icons have we watched live? And today, we got word of the death of a person that I believe is an icon. Billy Graham, Reverend Billy Graham, passed away at the age of 99. And a spiritual advisor to many presidents, influencer of probably 1 billion people worldwide. Incredible human being and one worthy of our honor today. I would ask that the Senate have a moment of silence.
Please rise. Amen. Please be seated. Thank you. Further remarks? Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand in recess until 5 p.m.
Are there announcements? Senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet this afternoon at 3:30 in room 451M. Then we will also be meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the same room, and the agenda has been posted.
Senator from Monroe County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Education Committee meeting will continue immediately following this afternoon's floor session in the Senate Finance.
Senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 p.m. in room 208 West.
Senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Energy will meet tomorrow at 1 o'clock in 208 West, and the agenda will be posted.
Further announcements? The senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder, your Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development will meet today at 2 p.m., 208 West.
The senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Economic Development will meet today at 12:45 p.m. The agenda has been posted and has since been downsized. The meeting will be in 208 West.
The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Health will continue their meeting at 1:30 p.m. in room 451M, and we will also meet on our regularly scheduled time tomorrow at 1 p.m. in the same room.
Further announcements? The senator from Upshur County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Pensions will be meeting today at 2 p.m. in 451M. The agenda is posted.
Senator from Mercer County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Workforce will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., 208 West.
Further announcements? Not. The question before the Senate is, shall the Senate stand in recess until 5 p.m. this evening? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess until 5 p.m. today.
House will be in order. All those not having privileges to the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests will please rise as we're led in prayer today by the West Virginia School for the Deaf and the Blind, who are the guests of Delegate Rowan.
Our Father, I ask your blessings today on this house, the house of the people. I also ask a special blessing today on some pretty awesome young people gathered here with us. May all those gathered here in your presence today perform in a manner that will bring you honor and glory. These things I ask in your precious holy name. Amen.
Members and guests will please remain standing as we're led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Delegate Ron.
Thank you. Today assisting me are the students from the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Tuesday, February 20th, 2018.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 54th, Delegate Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would ask unanimous consent that the further reading of this journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Gentleman from the 54th asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Journal is approved as having been read. The lady from the 57th, Delegate Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have in the chamber with us several special guests here to hear our children perform. We have Clayton Birch, the Assistant Superintendent, Michelle Blatt, Assistant Superintendent, President of the West Virginia State School Board, Tom Campbell, Vice President of the State School Board, Dave Perry. We also have board members, Deborah Sullivan, Miller Hall. Also from the Deaf and Blind School, we have our administrators, Mark Andolfi and Jamie Victoria. But most important of all, we have from West Virginia's oldest county, the students from the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind.
It's always one of the highlights of our session to have our guest here today, and we want to thank you again for being here, and let's give our guests one more hand as they leave the thing. John from 64, Doggett Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, can we keep our colleague, Amy Summers? We just had the news that she had collapsed over on the Senate side. I don't know all the particulars, but if we could have a moment of prayer for Amy, keep her in your thoughts and prayers. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for you to look after our colleague, Amy Summers. Father, we ask that you comfort her, and we ask for the well wishes that she recovers. And Father, we just ask and pray that you look after our colleague. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Introduction of guests. I'm sorry. Gentleman from 64th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Graham once said, "Someday you will read or hear that Billy Graham is dead." And he went on to say, "Don't you believe a word of it. I shall be more alive than I am now. I will have just changed my address. I will have gone into the presence of God." Could we have a moment of silence for America's evangelist, Reverend Billy Graham?
If all members and guests would please rise for a moment of silence. Members and guests may be seated. The gentleman for the 42nd, Doggett Ambler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have with us from the Greenbrier Valley, where the air is cleaner and the water greener, members of our Greenbrier Valley Airport. We have with us, and this is on behalf of Delegate Campbell and myself, we're pleased to welcome both the manager and who happens to be Mr. Stephen Snyder in the West Gallery, if he'd please stand, and the director of our security and safety at the Greenbrier Valley. Gentlemen, if you'd please stand, we would like to welcome you with the House. Please give them a big welcome.
John for 25th, Doggett Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegates Dean, Phillips, Rodrigo, and Adkins, I'm honored to introduce to you this morning and to the members of the House our Honorary Secretary of State students for the day. The Honorary Secretary of State program recognizes high school students from across the state who have been leaders in voter registrations among their classmates. From Wyoming County, in the heart of the 25th District, home of the most beautiful land in the world and the finest people in the world, I'd like to introduce from Westside High School, Miss Brooke Gallion, and from Wyoming East, Mr. Cameron Cook and Brianna Stevens. They are accompanied by two of Wyoming County's finest educators, Miss Tammy Blankenship and Mr. Anthony Dunn. Please stand, and I ask that the House make them all welcome.
The John from 66, Doggett Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A note to presence in the chamber of a former colleague and the current Vice President of the West Virginia Board of Education, Dave Perry. Will the House please make our former colleague welcome?
John from 33rd, Doggett Hanshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've had an opportunity to walk in the well of the Capitol a little bit today. Today is Food and Farm Coalition Day here at the Capitol. We have a number of folks with us today who are explaining to anyone who will listen the value of local foods. The value of the food economy in West Virginia is about a $6 billion enterprise. That's billion with a B here in our state, yet we produce less than $1 billion of it here in West Virginia. We have with us today folks from the Food and Farm Coalition and particularly the Clay County FFA chapter from my home community. I'd ask the House to please welcome all of them to the Capitol today. Thank you for being here.
John from 13th, Doggett Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery, I'm honored to introduce my intern this session, Joe Payton, if you'd please stand. And he has been a tremendous help for myself and Delegate Pack so far this session. But unfortunately, he will not be with us for the next few weeks of session. Monday morning, he is actually joining the Marine Corps and will be headed to boot camp. So if the House would please make him feel welcome and thank him for his service.
John from the 14th, Doggett Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us in the West Gallery, we have a good friend of mine, and this is on behalf of all the Mason County delegation, a good friend of mine, and theirs, I'm sure, too, a citizen activist and a member of the Citizens Defense League, Mr. Dale Darst. Dale, if you'd stand up in the House, please welcome him.
John from 21st, Doggett Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to have a group here from Gilbert Middle School, my former school and my future school next year. Guys, if you would please stand. This is the Beta Club from Gilbert Middle, and they're accompanied today by Miss Karen Cook and Miss Debbie Butcher. Friends, you should make them feel welcome.
John from the 9th, Doggett Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just by way of announcement, I want to give an update on our colleague from the 10th. His wife texted me and said that Frank is out of surgery and he's doing well. But I ask for continued prayers for Frank and his wife, Becky, please.
Lady from the 31st, Doggett Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is my second week of session, my 8th official day, but I was really surprised and really excited to see I have some pages here today. So this will be the first time I get to announce pages from my district today. So I'm really excited about that, and I got to meet them. And I know their parents are in the gallery, and I haven't got to meet them yet. So if the House would make Taylor Stepp, Alexis Cook, and Madison McCoy feel welcome today, and I can't wait to meet their parents after session. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from the 47th, Doug Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Delegate Jennings and I are honored to have a page with us today from Tucker County, and his name is Alexander Lambert. And I don't see Alexander right here he is. Alex, wave. If the House would make him feel welcome. Thank you. And also with him are his parents, David and Alicia Lambert, and they are in the gallery behind me. And if they would stand, and the House would welcome them also. Thank you very much.
John for the 12th, Delegate Rodriguez. I'm sorry, John for the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Southern West Virginia, we have some pages from Logan High School. We have Alexis Perry, Alexis Canterbury, Kaylee Williams, and they're accompanied by Amy Caldwell, Crystal Canterbury, Melinda Kirkland. Would the floor please make them welcome? Thank you.
John for the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from Cabell, Lincoln, and Wayne, I have the pleasure today to introduce some special guests in the South Gallery. When I say you all please stand up. With us today we have the operating engineers, Local 132. There are some very, very hardworking folks that represent heavy equipment operators throughout the state. House, please make them feel welcome.
John for 29th, Doug Moy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of all the delegates that represent Raleigh County, we have some very special pages here from Park Junior High, or excuse me, Park Middle School. It was a junior high when I went there. And as I call your names, if you'll stand up and wave to everybody, it'd be nice. Andrew Petrie, Jack Grimmett, Emily Worley, Kate Kinder-Shaler, Sydney Vaught, Connor Mullahan, don't see Connor, Allison Arthur, Kate Fisher, and Zoe Wood. And they are accompanied today by their parents, and if their parents will stand when I call their names, we have Stephanie Petrie, Julie Grimmett, Denise Worley, Kelly Vaught, Jeff Mullahan, Shem Arthur, and Lori Fisher. Will the House please make our very special guest welcome?
John for 17th, Delegate Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor today to introduce two special guests on behalf of the Cabell delegation. They're in our South Gallery. The first is Jenny Anderson. Jenny is the director of the Families Leading Change. That's a statewide coalition supporting parents, schools, and communities. And beside her is Tom Boggs. Tom is the president of the Wild Ramp there in Cabell County. He's here today supporting local foods and the Food and Farm Coalition. He's my next door neighbor, one of my best friends, and we've been practicing law together for 20 years. So House, please make him feel welcome.
John for 32nd, Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to introduce on behalf of the delegates from Raleigh and my colleagues from the 32nd who represent a portion of Raleigh County, Visiting in the South Gallery, we have some folks who represent the community resource. And first, Becky Cook, she's the community resource advocate. Please stand, Becky. We have Vicki Matheny from Raleigh County, Kelly Adkins from Raleigh County, and Felilia, get this one right, Felilia Tater from Raleigh County, and Jordan Dunn from Raleigh County, along with Bud Belt from Raleigh County, and Gray McGraw from Raleigh County, and Comet Barnhart from Raleigh County. It's not my day. Let's give them all a big welcome. Thank you.
Further introductions. Lady from 31st,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My pages are from Oceana Middle School, and I forgot to say that part, so I can just ask for grace that everything is new to me, but they are from Oceana Middle School, and that's great, and I'm excited, and thank you.
All right. Further introductions. Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 4214, increasing penalties for unlawfully possessing or digging ginseng, and House Bill 4546, relating to where an application for a marriage license may be made. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 181, authorizing maps, promulgate legislative rules, and Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 348, allowing for disposal of service weapons of special DNR police officers. Reports the same back with amendments, with the recommendation that each do pass as amended.
Report be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration House Bill 4153, imposing a health care related provider tax on certain health care organizations. Reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Report be received and the bill be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration House Bill 4366, relating to the approval of additional beds for intermediate care facilities. Reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Judiciary.
Report be received, the bill be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on Energy has had under consideration House Bill 4563, removing the severance tax on oil and gas produced from low-producing wells. Reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Report be received, the bill be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Energy has had under consideration House Bill 2534, authorizing local units of government to adopt local energy efficiency partnership programs. Reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report be received, the bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined and found truly enrolled and presented to His Excellency the Governor on February 21st, 2018, Committee Substitute for House Bill 4162, granting authority to the State Conservation Committee to contract for flood response.
Report be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration House Bill 4623, relating to obtaining substance abuse treatment services. Reports back a committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report be received. Reports of select committees. Messages from the Executive.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Armstead presents a communication from His Excellency the Governor advising that on February 20th, 2018, he approved House Bill 4020.
Message will be received. Messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announced that the Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 4380, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Agriculture.
Message be received.
The Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 4381, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Education.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 4384, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Transportation.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 4386, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Health and Human Resources, Division of Health, Community Mental Health Services.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 319, allowing individuals who completed homeschooling be eligible for a promised scholarship without equivalent diploma.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Education and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 398, relating to requirements for making consumer loans.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on the Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 406, clarifying that ground emergency medical transportation is eligible for Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Banking and Insurance and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 415, permitting wagering on certain professional or collegiate sports events authorized as West Virginia lottery sports wagering activities.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 450, collecting and analyzing statistical information pertaining to terminating pregnancies under Medicaid program.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Health and Human Resources and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 451, relating generally to hunting and fishing.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Natural Resources and then to Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 475, Industrial Hemp Development Act.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources and then to Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 479, establishing local government monitoring by auditor.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Government Organization and then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 494, considering members of state teachers' retirement system absent while serving as officer with statewide professional association.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on Pensions and Retirement, then to Finance.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 512, authorizing certain West Virginia courthouse security officers carry concealed weapons.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to Committee on the Judiciary. Resolutions, petitions, motions, bills introduced, unfinished business, bills on third reading.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 4011, requiring agencies when submitting a new rule or changes to also identify two existing rules that could be repealed.
The question before the House is the passage of the bill. Gentleman from the 56th, Delegate Howe, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to require agencies when submitting new legislative rules or changes to existing legislative rules to provide a list of two sections, subsections, or smaller divisions in that rule which contain rules, regulations, or policies that could be removed, or identify another legislative rule over which the agency has control that could be removed, with each new policy being added to the rule. I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? Gentleman from 35th, Delegate Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Yeah, I'm looking at this new language. On line 15, I'm confused. Why do you have regulations in there? What regulations do we have in West Virginia? I know we got state code and we have state rules.
That's just catch-all language.
But we don't have any regulations in West Virginia, do we?
We have rules that some people refer to as regulations.
But we've got rules in here, right? Contains rules, regulations, or policies. But that was just, I've seen regulations in it, but you're just saying it's a catch-all?
Yes.
Okay. My second question is, I understand the policy behind this, and I applaud that, but what about for entities like the Chapter 30 boards, like barbers and beauticians? Like, what if they don't have, it's one rule and they don't have two rules to propose? What do you do in that situation?
Well, it's not a full rule. It can actually be subsections. They can suggest even a minor change to something, even in an individual sentence, the way it is drafted.
So if they don't have anything, could they just change a comma to a semicolon and that would count?
They could actually suggest that and that would count.
Okay, and the other thing is, I don't see any sunset provision in this. Is this in perpetuity?
Yes.
Was there any consideration on sunsetting this, like saying this, do this for a period of 5 years? Because I mean, if you got to admit, eventually they're going to run out of things, especially these smaller boards like barbers and beauticians, to find.
I have a stack of the rules in my office, and they're, 5 years wouldn't even begin to put a dent in it.
Well, and I agree with you. Like DHHR, the DEP, I'm sure there's tons of them, but you got to agree with me on barbers and beauticians. I mean, eventually they're just going to have to look for things and might be forced to be in a position to just say, let's just change a period to a semicolon just so we satisfy this rule. I mean, would you agree with me on that?
It would probably be 100 years or more till we got to that level, but...
For barbers and beauticians?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for the 55th, Douglas Spinato.
Will the chairman continue to yield?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
I believe here a few years ago we passed a bill out that sunset every agency regulation, that they had to be re-upped. I can't remember exactly. Is it every 5 years? 3 to 5 years they automatically sunsetted?
5 years for new rules from the date of that passage. It does not affect the old rules, which there are plenty of on the books.
So there's going to be a mass bunch of, I'm assuming, rules that they're going to keep having to come back to the legislature. Are these agencies then going to have to point out 2 more? It just seems like it's, a couple years ago we took the path that we were going to sunset every new reg, and then they would have to come back to try to clean up our regulation on the books, which is certainly one method to do it. This is an entirely different method where you come up with 2 and 1. Is it starting? Do we need to pick a course and go with it, or do you think this is going to be too burdensome on the agencies? Or
I don't think it'll be burdensome at all. I mean, we literally have so many rules, and that only is going forward on the part that you talked about on the sunset. This is going to start to catch some of the rules that, maybe they haven't looked at them in years, and a lot of times when we have those rules, we find they're obsolete anyway. So they're going to identify a lot of obsolete rules that don't really have any purpose anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? Lady from 51st, Douglas Pleshire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This would apply to mine safety rules too, so that, we have those 29 people that were killed, and mine safety would just have to come up with 2 regulations that aren't necessary. I mean,
the gentleman yield.
Will the gentleman yield?
Are you asking? Gentleman yields.
It would look at safety rules, but it still requires action by this body. And I don't think there's a soul in here that would remove a safety rule that had a purpose. And I doubt many of the agencies would introduce or would say, hey, we want to get rid of a safety rule. If that was the case, we're probably got a bigger problem with that agency.
Or with the legislature, when we moved the rules that said you couldn't work in by, we have removed safety rules, but they're going to have, the agency is mandatory to come up with something to get rid of under this statute.
Could. I mean, it could be a very minor thing like the gentleman from the 35th said. They could change a comma to a semicolon.
Why would we do that? Why would we tell agencies, you have to do this and you can comply by changing a comma? Don't agencies have better things to do? Like those that inspect coal mines and try to keep our people coming home at night from a dangerous job?
Agencies do have better things to do, but one of the things that we task our agencies with is having regulations that are good for safety, but also good for the industry and the public in which they serve. And especially stuff dealing with small businesses, maybe it's the barbers where it's a small business. When you have pages and pages and pages of regulations, it makes it hard on those businesses to comply to them. In some cases, we've seen where one regulation conflicts with another. We see it in here all the time. And what it will do is it will allow them to begin to take those regulations out to make it easier for the layperson to understand so that they can comply with those regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the bill?
Lady, may proceed.
Thank you. I'm a person that believes that, especially when it comes to safety, we may not have enough regulation. I don't want to see anybody dying on the job if that's possible. And I think this is a silly bill. It's just an exercise in make work, and I urge rejection of the bill.
John for 36, Doug Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reading the bill and I'm just astounded. I mean, we require rules to be promulgated time after time, every single session. And if you have a new agency, they don't have any rules to repeal. I mean, they're not there. I mean, this is pure, this is make work. It makes no sense that we're just sort of, it's just hard to justify that we would require an agency to repeal two regulations for every one that they propose to be adopted. As I read this, I don't understand the need for it. I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to add to the work. I've been privileged to be on the interim committee for rulemaking, and it's just going to add to our work because we're going to be having to go through not just the bills to see if the policy is good policy, but looking at whatever is being repealed, those regulations as well. I don't understand the purpose of the bill or the benefit of the bill, and I'll be opposing it. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman from 39, Doug Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage of this bill. West Virginia has over 100,000 regulations on the books. That's more than North Carolina has. That's more than Maryland has. And we need to start to clear this stuff out. Earlier, we had to pass one bill to get rid of being charged for a misdemeanor for starting your car in the morning to warm it up in your driveway. Why does that need to be on the books? No one's going to try to kill safety regulations. No one's going to try to kill stuff, but there's so much redundancy. For you that have been here a long time, we've had to rewrite whole agencies' section of the code just to get rid of the stuff that's sitting in there. So this has a great deal of practical application. We can come back at any time once we think we've cleaned out enough regulation and do away with this. So I urge passage of it. Let them think about what they've got written in the code. Let them think about what needs to be removed instead of just piling it on and piling it on year after year and never looking back to take the stuff off. I urge passage of this bill.
Jonathan 67, Doug Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill. As the gentleman just mentioned, there's 125,000 regulations in this state. So, and you put that into context with Maryland, we got 4,000 more than Maryland. We talked about here recently North Carolina being this great economic example of something that we need to emulate. We have 16,000 more regulations than Maryland does, or pardon me, than North Carolina does. We're one of the top 10 most regulated states in the country. And I think this is something that you have to understand. I mean, from my perspective, somebody who worked in the federal government, these regulations are not only debilitating to the individuals that it affects in society, but it's also for the individual that works within the government itself. It is debilitating in their ability to be able to execute their duties. So the current status, I mean, with the amount of regulations that we have, I mean, it's a sincere impediment to economic growth, and I would urge passage of this bill. And I congratulate the chairman on bringing forward a bill that really looks to address the issue of slowed economic growth in this state. Thank you.
Jonathan 48, Doug Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, it's kind of surprising there's this much debate. I think this is actually one of the simplest and most practical bills that we've had this session. These agencies and boards are the ones that are the most familiar with these rules. They deal with them on a daily basis with the public, and this bill is simply permissive. The board or agency shall suggest rules to the legislature that may be repealed. The legislature is not required to do anything with them, but these agencies know these rules front and back, and I mean, periodically we get this to happen anyway, but all this would do is require them to review that and possibly and suggest rules that could possibly be repealed. So for those reasons, I urge passage.
Jonathan 60, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman please yield?
Gentleman yields.
Sir, in listening to some of my colleagues speak here, I've gotten the idea that this is some sort of silly, pedantic weirdness that you've dreamed up to just cause problems for people in the agencies. Is that correct, sir?
That is not correct.
Okay. Is the intent to force the agencies to give up regulations that they might need or rely on?
Not that they need or rely on.
Okay. Is the intent to actually force them to give up any regulations?
They wouldn't have to give up any.
Okay. So in other words, they choose which regulations they bring for our consideration.
That's correct.
Interesting. So effectively, if I understand the intent here, what we're doing is we're saying that every time you want to put a new burden on the people of this state or a new regulation, and they are regulations, whatever name you want to call them by, you want to place more of a regulatory burden on the people and the businesses of this state, you must review your code and determine what burden you can remove from them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
Gentleman may proceed.
I highly support this and recommend that everyone else does as well for the good of the people of this state. Thank you, sir.
Lady from the 18th, Doggett Simonia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the chair of the rulemaking committee, and I've been on that committee over a decade as a member, but the legislature, every time we pass a bill, usually in the body of the legislation, no matter what the issue is, we give the agency the authority to promulgate a rule. And that authority lasts basically forever until we revoke that authority. There are some rules that are presented to our committee year after year where the authority was given maybe 40, 50, 60 years ago. And when some of those rules come before our committee, and I sit there and scratch my head and think, why did we have to do this? It's because we gave them that authority decades and decades ago. I would welcome anyone to go down to my office, and there you will find a filing cabinet. And if I stacked up the rules that come before our committee, and mind you, we only have 4 months as a committee to go through the rules and regulations, and you stack them for one session that we have to consider, they will stack up as higher than my waist. And they fill an entire drawer of a filing cabinet. And that's just for one session. We're talking about regulation year after year after year that accumulates. And what does regulation mean? It means the cost of jobs. Because the more people have to pay for regulation from the government, that's less jobs that they can provide for the people that need them the most here in West Virginia. Now, this is only codifying what the President of the United States and the Governor have both suggested. We're just going to put it in code. And any bill that we present here in the legislature and adopt can be repealed later on if we find that there is a big problem. But I can guarantee you that this will make the agencies more mindful when they use their authority from 50 years ago to promulgate a rule. They might scratch their heads and think, maybe we shouldn't have to put this forward for the legislature to consider because we have to come up with some suggestions for possible repeal. It might make them a little bit more mindful when they present us new regulations. We want regulation, but we want regulation that makes sense and that will protect the public. But there are a lot of rules and regulations on our books that don't do that. It's just because they have the authority to put this bureaucratic layer of regulation on the people that we represent. And I urge adoption of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John 37th, Doggett Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Government Organizations...
Gentleman yields.
I just want to follow up on something that was stated by the other gentleman from Kanawha over here. How would this affect new agencies?
Anytime that we create, at least since I've been here, that we've created a new agency, it was just parts of other agencies either put together or separated that had their own rules, and we said that the rules transferred with them. So those rules still existed.
Okay. Well, we've created two new, I don't know if they're under the Bureau for Public Health. I know since, in the short period of time I've been here, just since last year, we've created the Office for Drug Control Policy and the Medical Cannabis Board, who are coming up with rules. So where would they remove rules from in order to create these new rules that we need, because in order to come up with policy that we voted on last year?
I'm familiar with the bills, but were they legislative rules or administrative? Because this is legislative.
I believe they have to come up with new rules for to comply with the legislation we passed.
This only applies to legislative rules.
They were legislative. They are legislative rules.
The bill is silent as to how a new agency is impacted, but either way, it would come to the legislature. And since it is silent, they could literally say, we're a new agency, we don't have any rules to do.
Would they be in violation of this code then?
No,
if this was to pass?
because the code is silent.
All right, I'm a bit confused. I'm gonna thank you. Speak to the bill briefly.
John, may proceed.
I'm not exactly sure how well thought out this was. It sounds great. Yeah, we want to get rid of rules, overburdensome rules, onerous rules. We don't have, we've been referring to it as regulations. Technically, we don't have regulations. I'm all for cleaning up the books, getting rid of things that we don't need, but you know, just to say we have to get rid of two in order to have one. We've created new offices, new boards, new commissions, and I just heard that this legislation is silent on that, so they just won't have to comply with it. That doesn't make much sense to me. So until this could be cleared up, I'm just going to have to vote against it.
Other members desiring to speak before I recognize the gentleman to close. Gentleman from 56 to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill really is common sense. Rules have the force of law, and we know that ignorance of the law is no excuse. But when you have over 100,000 rules, a state code that if you look on the shelf, it's feet long, and a federal code that's even longer, how can anybody know whether they're breaking the rules or the law? If you're a small business owner and you're trying to get into a barber shop, you have rule upon rule upon rule trying to figure out how you're going to make a living for your family. Yes, there are safety rules, but there are a lot of rules that have nothing to do with safety. And in many times the rules are contradictory because nobody's ever went back and looked at them to take them out. We're simply asking these various state agencies on these legislative rules that when you propose a new one, let's go in, take a look at these rules that's been in place 50 years or more. Does it make sense anymore? And if it doesn't, let's get it out of there. This is very common sense. It'll streamline everything. The safety of the public is still protected, but our businesses, specifically our small businesses, will be able to understand the rules in which they have to play by and be able to grow and create jobs in this great state. Mr. Speaker, I urge the passage.
Request before the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 84 ayes, 14 nays, 2 members absent not voting. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 4011.
Are there amendments to the title? Not the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Further bills on third reading.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 4022, exempting the consumer sales and service tax and use tax for services for the repair, remodeling, and maintenance of certain aircraft.
Question before the House is the passage of the bill. The gentleman from the 48th, Delegate Hamrick, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would amend the provisions of West Virginia Code relating to consumer sales and service tax. Simply, current code contains a sales and use tax exemption for maintenance and repair of aircraft that are owned by common carriers or government entities. House Bill 4022 would very narrowly expand this exemption to include aircraft operated under fractional ownership programs. Mr. Speaker, that's the explanation of the bill.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. In this question, 95 ayes, 3 nays, 2 members absent not voting. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4022.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Further bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4079, promulgating administrative rules by various executive or administrative agencies of the state.
Question for the House is the passage of the bill. We have a number of members who will be explaining portions of this bill. The gentleman from the 33rd, Delegate Hanshaw, to explain a portion of the bill.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before you is what I'm sure is the highlight of the session for all, and that is the miscellaneous rules bundle. So we have 36 rules in this bundle. So we'll start. I'm going to take the first third of them. The first begins with a rule by the Board of Accountancy. This rule provides a process for the board to implement a background check for those individuals who apply for licensure as a CPA. Next comes 7 rules from the Department of Agriculture. The first relates to the process for getting what's called honor flock certification for chickens and birds on your farm, and provides a requirement that sheep and goats, which are shown at fairs and exhibitions around our state, have what's called a CVI, a Certificate of Veterinary Inspection. That's already the law for other species of animal. This rule expands that requirement to sheep and goats. The next rule, 61 CSR 11B, addresses auctioneers. This rule relates specifically to the bonding requirements for auctioneers. Under current law, there's a bonding requirement that all auctioneers satisfy. That bond has to be posted with the Department of Agriculture. The purpose of this rule is to address circumstances that were considered high-risk auctioneers. It raises that minimum bond requirement from $10,000 to $25,000. Next comes 61 CSR 14A. This is the noxious weed rule in West Virginia. Noxious weeds are those things determined by the Department of Agriculture to be invasive species, things that can sort of take over an area and become a problem by choking out other more valuable crops and species. This rule adds 2 species, kudzu and the Japanese barberry, to that list of noxious and invasive species. Next comes 61 CSR 16. This rule relates to West Virginia's meat and poultry inspection program. And like some of the other rules that I've described before, West Virginia's meat inspection program is a delegated authority program from the federal government. We administer that program here on behalf of USDA. This rule updates our meat inspection program to conform to the minimum requirements of the federal government meat and poultry inspection program. Next comes 61 CSR 2. This rule relates to our apiary program, so that's honeybees. Last year, the legislature adopted a Senate bill which changed the date on which the certification each year becomes effective. This rule simply conforms the date in the rule to the date that's now in the code. Then we come to 61 CSR 23D. This rule relates to home rabbit production. So our law actually provides that individuals who want to raise rabbits for sale as meat animals in West Virginia can do so exempt from certain requirements of the meat and poultry inspection program, which would otherwise be triggered by on-farm slaughter. This rule raises the exemption from 1,000 rabbits to 20,000 rabbits. We heard in committee that we don't yet have any producers in West Virginia at 20,000 rabbits, but the department views this as a potential area for expansion in local restaurants in West Virginia and felt like that exemption was appropriate. The next rule is 61 CSR 8B, and this rule relates to a process that involves on-farm auditing. And one of the things that's beneficial about the rule is that individuals who want to be audited by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to have what's called Good Agricultural Practices certification can do so through a program administered here at the state level. That federal rate has raised from $92 an hour to $108 an hour. This rule conforms West Virginia's GAP program to the federal program. Now we come to 2 rules from the Athletic Commission. These rules relate to boxing and mixed martial arts. The first is 177 CSR 1, and this rule puts into the rules what is in the statute. It implements a $20 registration fee for amateur boxers. That fee was established by Senate Bill 495 and its related amendments. And the next rule, 177 CSR 2, makes the exact same changes for mixed martial artists. Then we come to the Board of Licensed Dietitians. There's one rule offered by that board this year, and the purpose of that rule is to provide that fees be set at $50 for renewal of an application as a licensed dietitian. Coming next to the Board of Hearing Aid Dealers. The Board of Hearing Aid Dealers has one rule before us this session. The purpose of this rule is to add a fee of $150 for applicants taking the practicum exam to receive that license. The purpose of this rule is to cover the cost of administering the examination. That's the first third of the rules. Mr. Chairman.
Jonathan 27th, Doggett Shot, to explain the district.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Building on the excitement generated by the gentleman from the 33rd, I have 14 rules I'd like to add to that excitement. The first two are from the Board of Medicine. The first one deals with the licensure, disciplinary, and complaint procedures and continuing education with respect to our physician assistants. If you will recall, during the first extraordinary session of the legislature in 2017, we passed Senate Bill 1014, which dealt with physician's assistants. This rule basically just defines terms, updates nomenclature, modified the prescriptive authority of a physician assistant, eliminated certain recertification requirements, eliminated the continuous national certification requirement, prohibited an insurance plan for limiting the practice of a physician assistant, added requirements for practice agreements, and granted a PA the signatory authority on certain forms. The second rule from the Board of Medicine deals with continuing education for physicians and podiatric physicians, basically serving 6 different purposes. First, to modernize and clarify the language of the existing rule. It identifies when an applicant may utilize postgraduate training to satisfy the continuing education requirements. It updates the requirements for drug diversion training and best practices for prescribing training in order to incorporate a training component on the prescription administration of an opioid antagonist. It also clarifies that 3 hours of board-approved drug diversion training and best practices for prescribing controlled substances must be completed each renewal cycle, unless there are certain exemptions which are spelled out in the rule. It clarifies when written documentation of successful completion of continuing medical education must be submitted to the board for the renewal, change of status, reinstatement, and reactivation applications. And finally, it establishes a protocol for board approval of drug diversion training and best practices prescribing of controlled substances. There's a rule from the Board of Optometry. Basically, these rules are updated to comply with the provisions of Lynette's Law that was passed during the 2016 regular session, and the rule is amended to require new applicants to undergo a state and national background check. There's also a rule from the Board of Osteopathic Medicine dealing with osteopathic physician assistants, and it basically mirrors the same rule was the first rule I outlined, basically that was necessitated by Senate Bill 1014 and has the same basic thrust for osteopathic physician assistants. Next, we get to 7 rules from the Board of Pharmacy. The first one is a new series, Title 15, Series 14, to allow for the central filing of prescriptions. Basically, the language of this rule was cut from another series and moved into a new Series 14, and it also amends the application fee. The second rule deals with wholesale drug distributor. It makes certain requirements of reporting to the board. For instance, when a wholesale drug distributor determines to stop distributing and controlled substances to a customer, it must report to the board, and also must report when it determines not to commence distribution to a potential customer due to concerns over the customer's use of those substances for other than a legitimate medical purposes. It also has a 0 reporting requirement if there are no suspicious orders in a calendar month. And finally, it has to report the same suspicious orders as are reported to the DEA. The next rule establishes standards for the training and regulation of pharmacy technicians and pharmacy technician trainees, and it sets out the eligibility standards for an applicant who must either files an application and fee and must be either a graduate from high school, obtained a GED, be enrolled in a high school, or be enrolled in a board-certified learning institution, or in a training center competency-based pharmacy technician education and training program, or be employed in a pharmacy with on-the-job training. The next rule establishes requirements to record and retain in a single repository of information certain drugs of concern and opioid antagonists. It requires inputs of drugs of concerns into the Controlled Substance Monitoring Program, otherwise known as CSMP. A drug of concern is a prescription drug which is not a controlled substance, but which has a high potential for abuse. For example, gabapentin is added as a drug of concern. That drug is approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration to treat epilepsy and pain related to nerve damage called neuropathy. However, it can enhance the euphoria caused by an opioid and stave off drug withdrawals. In addition, it can bypass the blocking effects of medications used for addiction treatment, enabling patients to get high while on recovery. The rule grants access to the program by the dean of any medical school, a physician reviewer designated by an employer of medical providers, a chief medical officer of a hospital, or a physician designated by the chief executive officer of a hospital, and also authorized agents of OFLAC and authorized agents of the West Virginia Bureau of Medical Services. The next rule deals with the operation of physician recovery networks. The rule requires pharmacy recovery networks these rules have not been updated for several years, and the changes were made to modernize the rules. It also establishes the composition of the board of directors and addresses the agreement with the pharmacy recovery network where there is sufficient reason for action. It also requires an evaluator to conduct an in-person substance abuse evaluation and defines impairing mental disorder per current edition of the DSM of mental disorders. It clarifies that the information obtained is not public information and establishes that if a person violates the terms of the program, the information shall be submitted to the board. And finally, clarifies that the board has sole discretion to designate recovery programs for licensee. The next rule provides rules for pharmacists and pharmacy interns to administer immunizations to patients through joint rulemaking by the West Virginia Board of Pharmacy, the West Virginia Board of Medicine, and the West Virginia Board of Osteopathy. These three boards have worked together to amend this rule. The rule defines immunization. It permits pharmacists and a pharmacy intern to give the human papillomavirus, HPV vaccine, to someone over the age of 18 and also to someone 11 through 18 with written informed parental consent or prescription by a physician, or where there are no counterindications to the patient that receives that vaccine. The next and final Board of Pharmacy rule is a new rule which creates the central filing and processing operation. The board granted a pharmacy chain a waiver to do a pilot program permitting a central filing and processing operation. Unlike retail pharmacies, which dispense controlled substances directly to the patient, central fill pharmacies provide a service to retail pharmacies by preparing and packaging prescriptions for retail pharmacies to dispense to the patient. Prescription information is transmitted from the retail pharmacy to a central fill pharmacy where the prescription is filled or refilled. The filled prescription is then delivered to the retail pharmacy for pickup by the patient. This rule would allow for central filing and processing of prescriptions by pharmacies licensed by the state, which would also include non-resident pharmacies. Finally, there are three rules from the Board of Psychologists. The first one deals with fees. It provides an updated fees structure for licenses granted by the Board of Psychologists. It also proposed amendments which are necessary to ensure that the board could continue to investigate ethics complaints against licensed psychologists here in West Virginia. And this is the first change to these rules in 13 years. It also makes it clear that the board is entirely funded by the fees it collects. The second Board of Psychologists rule deals with the requirements for licensure as a psychologist or of school psychologist and focuses on three aspects. First, it brings the rules into alignment with recent legislative changes in Chapter 30 It enables for psychologists to become licensed in a more streamlined and efficient manner, and it improves the board's organization. And finally, the last Board of Psychologists rule deals with the Code of Conduct. Historically, the board has adopted the Code of Ethics from the American Psychological Association. However, after receiving advice from its own legal counsel and others, the board has created a new code of its own, which basically is based on a national model and the Code of Ethics from the American Psychological Association.
The gentleman from 35th Delegate Capito to explain the remaining rules.
Part 3 of 3, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. The first rule comes to us today from the Real Estate Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. There's one rule. It's 190 CSR 2. The rule establishes the requirements for an applicant to become a licensed or certified real estate appraiser. It also reduces the number of classroom hours for continuing education and for appraiser apprentices from 150 hours to 75. It also requires an appraiser with an inactive license or certification to complete a 15-hour course. The next set of rules come to us from the Real Estate Commission. There's 3 rules. The first establishes general rules for filing applications for real estate licenses and the requirements necessary to renew licenses. This rule was rewritten and restructured, and some of the high points are a provision that addresses instances in which a broker passes away or becomes incapacitated, a licensee's duty to report certain actions such as disciplinary actions by other jurisdictions and civil actions. The next is a rule that establishes fees to be charged by the Real Estate Commission. The rule increases some fees for changes to current licensees and imposes fees on registration and renewal of continuing education providers and instructors. The rule does not change fees for licensing, license renewal, and examination. The final rule from the Real Estate Commission is a rule that establishes the requirements for real estate courses, course providers, and instructors. The rule changes the exam score requirements from letter grades to percentages. It also establishes minimum requirements and qualifications for approval and registration of providers, instructors, and courses. The next set of rules come to us from the Secretary of State. There are 3 rules. The first deals with the procedures for canvassing elections. The rule details procedures for the Board of Canvassers for canvassing results of elections conducted with paper ballots or electronically tabulated ballots, including optical scan ballots. The new rule describes and speaks to definition and adds votes that are cast on electronic voting machines to electronically tabulated ballots and eliminates joint canvassing. It describes the preparation for canvassing, makes the timing the same in every election, and adds provisional ballots to the list of those being canvassed. It corrects some issues, such as removing the counting of ballots from lever voting machines, correcting circuit clerk to county clerk as per statute, describes the procedures for hand counts, and begins a correction of the numbering of the subsection. This rule sunsets 10 years from the effective date. The next rule from the Secretary of State is regarding procedures for handling ballots and counting write-in votes in counties using optical scan ballots. The purpose of this is to authorize the Secretary of State to promulgate a legislative rule relating to procedures for handling ballots and counting write-in votes in counties using the optical scan ballots. The rule further clarifies the conditions for a county to handle these write-in votes. It deletes language relating to the punch card vote system and notes that write-in votes are not to be dealt with as per the relevant code provision cited. It also eliminates now obsolete language relating to straight ticket voting and adopts a sunset provision of 10 years. The last rule that comes to us from the Secretary of State's office is a rule related to the Vote by Mail pilot project, Phase 2, voting by mail. The proposed rule, it repeals the existing rule in its entirety as the pilot program expired over 3 years ago, but the rule has not been repealed. The last set of rules come to us from the Board of Veterinary Medicine. There are 3 rules. These are your last 3 rules. The first is a rule that establishes guidelines for the operation of the Board of Veterinary Medicine and licensing of veterinarians. The proposed rule reflects that the jurisprudence exam is now taken online. The proposed rule also changes the type of information that must be provided with an application for the examination. The rule modifies continuing education requirements and requires criminal history record checks for new applicants. The next rule establishes guidelines for training, examination, and procedures by which animal euthanasia technicians may be certified. The proposed rule adds reasons for disciplinary actions, including felony convictions using euthanasia drugs for any purpose other than humane animal euthanasia. The rule also requires inspection of registered facilities on a rotating basis every 2 years. The last rule sets fees to be charged by the Board of Veterinary Medicine. The rule rearranged the sequence of fees and also modified certain fees. The rule removes fees, including but not limited to temporary permit fees, change of address fees, and change of names fees. The rule adds fees related to inactive licenses, and the rule modifies fees that include but are not limited to duplicate licenses and inspection of facilities which employ a certified animal euthanasia technician. Mr. Speaker, that is the miscellaneous rules bundle, and I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman from the 48th, Doug Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chair please yield for a question?
Gentleman yields.
As long as you don't ask me to repeat all that, okay?
No, but I do first thank you for that very meticulous or painstaking explanation. But since we heard just a few minutes ago that there might not be ample existing rules, I just wanted to clarify and make sure that you said there are 36 total rules included in this bundle?
36 is the total number, yes.
36, okay. Thank you. That's my only question.
The gentleman from 39th, Doug Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all just sat here and listened to an explanation of 36 rules. As I kind of watched the room and looked around, I saw a number of eyes glaze over and people go off and talk to someone else. This is a good example of why we need to get rid of 2 to have 1. Because over the years, these type of situations were not explained to us. Rules prior to, I believe, our former speaker were not explained in detail, and I want to thank him for requiring them to be explained in detail. So we went through a bunch of years of that not happening. So for those of us whose eyes glazed over and we kind of lost interest in what they were saying, I'm not going to urge a yay or nay vote. I'm going to let you decide on your own.
Lady from the 3rd, Douglas Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman continue to yield?
Chairman yield. Chairman yields.
Yes.
Can you go back to the HPV vaccination part of the rule?
Yes.
And can you explain it a little bit? I caught part of it and I missed part of it. I just want to be clear on that part of the rule.
Give me just a second to find it. Basically, what the rule does is it allows pharmacists and pharmacy interns to administer certain immunizations. This, as I indicated before, this rule was worked out by 3 different boards: pharmacy, medicine, and osteopathy. Basically, it defines what an immunization is, and the change of the rule is it permits a pharmacist and pharmacy intern to give the HPV vaccine, 1, to someone over 18. 2, if they're 11 through 18, then they either have to have a written informed consent prescription from a physician, and there has to be no contraindications to that patient for receiving that vaccine.
Okay, thank you.
John from 63rd, Delia Folk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chair yield?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Yes.
Would you concede that out of 36 rules, that there's a pretty strong possibility there's maybe 1, 2, 3, a half a dozen that each and every member might have concerns about?
Well, I can't speculate. I mean, these are obviously important to somebody or they wouldn't be rule changes, but I can't speculate as to whether anyone in particular would be concerned enough about any particular rule to raise a question.
Are there any rules in here that allow for fee increases?
Yes. At least one that I did was the
Psychologist probably, right?
I think it went from 150 to 250, if I'm not mistaken. 125 to 250, that's the pharmacist.
I heard psychologist too. I'm not sure if you presented that bundle, lost track.
I did, and I don't recall the...
I heard you mentioning restructuring the fee schedule in the psychologist also.
Yes.
One other thing, the gentleman from Kanawha mentioned Secretary of State rules that have a sunset provision of 10 years. We passed a bill a few years ago to create a sunset provision of all rules of 5 years. Is there any conflict with the code in that?
Not that I know of.
I think it was 5 years.
Yeah, I think the statute said unless otherwise provided, it would be an automatic 5-year.
Okay, well, yeah, I can't.
So
I don't have
you could actually provide specifically a different time frame, but if you didn't provide any time frame, then the 5 years would be automatic.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. All right, thank you. Speak to the rules bundle.
John, may proceed.
I know everybody in here has got. Well, if you don't, you just are used to pushing the green button. I've had a problem when, I have no problem when you maybe take certain agencies, like Department of Agriculture, bundle their rules. Different boards bundle their rules. But to bundle all these different agencies and boards together, I've always had a problem with that. I'd equate this to, at least in my case, getting that nice big hamburger that you get in the summer, with a nice bun, lettuce, tomato, pickle, and then all of a sudden you put a cow patty on top of it, and you got to eat it. So think hard. I'm going to be like the other gentleman from Kanawha. There's at least a couple rules in here I have a very large concern for. The HPV vaccine I wasn't even aware of that. There's some serious concern about what I define as informed consent and what it actually should be informed consent. And for those reasons, think twice before you vote.
Lady from the 31st, Target Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to speak to the training in regards to a pharmacist who has the certificate to vaccinate. When we took the training, we vaccinated adults, not 11-year-olds, and I think we all can say that 11-year-old has an arm the consistency, the skin, the muscle mass, depending on the type of shot that it's the HPV in particular. But when we received training, we received it on adults, not children. And so while a script has to be presented for that to happen, I understand that, but I do know pharmacists that are concerned with that rule, as in they would want their 11-year-old to see their pediatrician for that vaccination. So just wanted to speak to that. Thank you.
The lady from 51st, Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the bill. I just want to remind members that we are the only state in the whole country that votes on rules. Normally, when agencies are given authority like the federal government, the agency just issues the rule, and the only way to deal with it is they're challenged in court. But in our state, we have a rulemaking review commission that meets hours and hours and hours in the summer, in the fall, in the spring, and we go over these regulations. And then they're assigned to committees, and they can be, we do read the comments that there's a opportunity for a public hearing, there's an opportunity to make comments, and of course most people aren't aware of that, but industries certainly are that are affected by these regulations. And then they're assigned to committees, and most rules go through 2 committees. And for the gentleman from Kanawha, one of the reasons why I wasn't paying a lot of attention is because I've seen them 3 times already, most of them. And so, I'm really familiar with these with the proposed rules, and there aren't any rules in here that we haven't given authority to the agency to issue. And we have cut back. We have carefully scrutinized fee increases. I can recall a time when I cross-examined one group for about a half an hour on why what they needed the fee increases were, and other people have actively asked about the necessity of fee increases. So that is something that we scrutinize in rulemaking review and in the other agencies that these rules go to. So, you can amend these rules. It's possible to do that in committee or here on the floor, but I think our rulemaking process is a little bit complicated, but in many ways I think it's good because we have much more involvement than any other state in the country and the federal government. And maybe that we have so many rules is because the legislature is involved. I'm not sure. But anyway, I urge passage also.
John for 15, Doug Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one thing, first of all, will the chairman of the judiciary yield?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Yes.
The one question I have for you is these rules have to abide constitutionally. They have to abide by the statute as written, correct? So the
Yes.
laws we make.
Part of the rulemaking review process is to be sure that the agency has not exceeded the scope of authority that the legislature gives, and it's also that it's consistent with the purpose of the statute under which or upon which the rulemaking is based. So that's part of the process, and then obviously when it goes through the committee process, there's also an issue of public policy. But the initial scope of review is to make sure that the agency has not exceeded its authority in proposing or in proposing the rule, and also that it's consistent with the purpose of the statute that it's based on.
All right, thank you. Speak to the bill.
John, may proceed.
Thank you. And the gentlelady from the 51st mentioned it, and we review these rules in Legislative Rulemaking Committee. I happen to be on that as well. The gentleman from the 63rd mentioned fee increases and changes. We actually sat down on all these fee increases, actually looked at the agency's budgets. There are, I believe, 4 or 5 rules. The gentlelady from the 18th might be able to clarify that a little better, but there are 4 or 5 rules that were injected in their entirety because they were just fee increases that were not needed. And as a Legislative Rulemaking Committee, I believe that that's something that's, well, a better way to classify that is the rule was withdrawn. And every single fee increase that is in any one of these rules was reviewed by your Legislative Rulemaking Committee, and we had the ability to look at their budgets, their expenditures, and why they needed it, and if they needed it. I believe the Racing Commission is one of them in this rules bundle. The Racing Commission was completely, they had a fee increase that didn't make sense, so we left the rule as is and pulled out all the fee increases in that one. So we have spent time reviewing these, and as has been previously testified, hours and hours upon end on it. And I don't believe it's prudent to vote against the rules bundle just because you may disagree with how our statute is written, because these abide by our current statute. And your Legislative Rulemaking Committee does spend a lot of time to review these, and from me being on that committee, I believe that these rules were thoroughly reviewed and that they do abide by statute, and the fee increases that are included in any of these rules are reasonable. Thank you.
John for 37, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from the 39th, please yield.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
To my colleague from Kanawha, always.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned, we just heard explanations of 36 rules that were in this bundle, and many of our eyes were glazing over here. But I was wondering, what 72 rules would you recommend eliminated if we were to promulgate these 36 rules?
Let me ask you. Well, let me answer it this way. If you go to our code book, they are in all different sections of each book that we have. That's where rules end up being placed. So I would have to know every section of our code and the rules that were applied in order to choose the right ones to take out.
No, I wouldn't be able to answer that either. But would you foresee next year, if legislation was passed earlier, if it's passed and signed, would we also hear explanations of the 36 rules that we're adopting, and then the 72 that we're also eliminating?
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
So we'll have to hear 108 explanations next year on a rules bundle like this. So.
Yeah, and we'd be here on the floor a little while longer.
Okay, well, thank you.
Lady from the 18th, Douglas Sabonia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I pointed out earlier on the other bill, the agencies promulgate rules because we tell them to. If you look at every bill that has come before this legislature, this legislative session, I would venture to say probably 90% of them say, we asked so-and-so agency to promulgate a legislative rule or emergency rules. So we're telling these agencies to promulgate the rules, and that's what's coming before us. If we don't want agencies to promulgate all these rules, we need to quit telling them to do so in the legislation that we pass. I would also additionally like to say that all of these rules go through a public comment period. And agencies put them out there. They're on the Secretary of State's website. And many of the rules that go before us are relating to different professions. And most professions have paid associations. They have membership associations that look out for the interests of their members. And so we have had communications through a lot of these associations and the leaders of the associations on behalf of their members. It's also important to point out that in the past, when the legislature here in West Virginia, being unique, as the gentlelady from the 51st said, there was only one omnibus rule bill, only one bill. And there were court decisions that had been gone through the Supreme Court, and they said we had to have them on subject. It used to be, it could be a DEP rule, and maybe a barber and cosmetology rule, a realtor rule, a pharmacy rule. It didn't matter what type of rule. It was in one omnibus bill. And I'd also like to say as well, as these rules bills go through the legislative process and they go through the committee process, each and every one of us, all 134 legislators, have the ability to amend them in the committees after they leave the rulemaking process. They also have the ability to request that if they don't like a certain rules bill, they can ask that it be taken out of the rules bundle, and that's been done in the past, where we have a separate vote on a problematic rule. Senator Maynard is my counterpart. He's the Senate chairman, and we even went above and beyond trying to get the information out to people so they know what's coming at them as it relates to regulation. We have created a Facebook page from our committee that we put every rule that starts coming to us in September. We have a link to the rule, so anybody can go to that Facebook page, and I encourage everyone to do so. And we also, as members of the committee, reach out to people in our own legislative districts saying, hey, this rule's before you. How is this going to impact you? We go the extra mile. Now, do we like regulation? We had a bill previously that said we wanted to roll some of it back. But we're telling these agencies to do it, and we need to be more mindful that if we don't want them to do it, we need to quit telling them to do it. So I'm going to vote for the rules bundle, even though I may not like some of it in there. Thank you.
Other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman from 27th wish to close debate?
Just a couple comments. The fact that we drone on down here on the floor on these rules in mass, so to speak, does not mean that that's the way they're examined as they come through the process. And I just want to make that clear. The Rulemaking Review Committee takes each rule individually and goes through what I would consider excruciating examination of each rule. So I'm not on that committee, so I feel comfortable in complimenting them for their hard work. They're sort of an invisible committee here that does probably works harder than anyone else, especially during the interims. And they're not the end of the line, though. These rules come through committees, at least 2 committees, before we present the summary. We bundle these at the end, but they're examined individually. I just want to make sure that, especially our new members, understood that. It's an extremely important process that we go through, and we're lucky to be able to do it. I'm not sure the people on the Rulemaking Review Committee would consider themselves lucky, but they serve a valuable purpose. And the fact that we just kind of do what we do when we get them here to the floor should not minimize the importance of the process and the work that they do. I urge passage of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 91 ayes, 7 nays, 2 members absent not voting. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4079.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, I move the bill be made effective from passage.
Gentleman from the 58th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. Excuse me. On this question, 96 ayes, 2 nays, 2 members absent not voting, 2/3 of the members elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Further bills.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4478, authorizing public schools to distribute excess food to students.
Request for the House is the passage of the bill. Gentleman from the 66th, Delegate Espinosa, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of our public schools have for several years had backpack programs and other initiatives to provide excess school lunch and breakfast food to students and local food banks. This bill expands on that effort by establishing a statewide shared table initiative. After that last bill, I'm a little embarrassed to say that this bill requires the state board to promulgate a policy guidance rule, but that rule is to ensure that the management and distribution of excess school food is consistent with the requirements and guidelines of state and county health departments, the United States Food and Drug Administration, and the Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. At a minimum, the guidance policy must include a list of the food products and distribution methods to make excess food available at other times during the school day, to distribute excess food to students to consume after school, and to otherwise donate excess food to persons or organizations providing food to individuals and families suffering from food insecurity. The Shared Table Initiative does not require school cafeterias to produce any extra food, but simply provides a framework for safely distributing food that is not consumed to students and others who may otherwise go without. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Gentleman from the 32nd. If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 97 ayes, 1 nay, 2 members absent not voting. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4478.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Further bills.
House Bill 4621, relating to removing reference to certain entities with respect to work.
Request for the House is the passage of the bill. Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Nelson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, House Bill 4621. Presently, an inmate of a county and regional jail may receive a sentence reduction of up to 25% of their time for certain approved work. This bill removes that cap and instead provides a 1-day sentence reduction for every 8 hours of approved performed work. The bill also, removes the reference of county commissioners as being an administrator and leaves the total administration to the executive director of regional jails or his or her designee. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is the passage of the bill. Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has each member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 97 ayes, 0 nays, 3 members absent not voting. The majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk, please report the title.
House Bill 4621.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk, please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 71, defining veteran as it pertains to veteran-owned business.
Are there amendments? No. Not to be advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 237, authorizing the Department of Revenue promulgate legislative rules.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Judiciary moves to amend the bill. This is H. Jude AM 2-2.
Gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Schott, asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This rule deals with the Farm to Food Bank tax credit, and that credit is available to farming taxpayers who donate edible agricultural products to nonprofit food programs. What the amendment simply does, the State Tax Department has asked us to remove one of the definitions dealing with value-added products, and basically to strike another provision that relates to that definition. That's all it does. These were considered by Finance, but were not included in the Senate version. The amendment just brings us in sync with the Senate version. I urge adoption.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor of adoption will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? Not the bill be advanced to third reading. Committee
substitute for House Bill 3061, encouraging mastery-based education through the Innovation in Schools program.
Are there amendments? Not the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4207, authorizing an online application to receive a commission to act as a notary public and eliminating the bond requirement.
Are there amendments? Not the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4296, establishing the Southern West Virginia Lake Development Study Commission.
Are there amendments? Not the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4368, relating to voluntary assignments of wages by state employees who have been overpaid.
Are there amendments? Not to be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
House Bill 4422, permitting permanent endowment funds of cemeteries to invest their principal in certain government bonds and corporate bonds.
Are there amendments?
No.
Not to be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4424, providing that the Ethics Act applies to certain persons providing services without pay to state elected officials.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Hanshaw moves to amend the bill. This is Hanshaw and R. Miller. This is HFA Hanshaw number 1.
Gentleman from 33rd, Delegate Hanshaw asks unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Gentleman from 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to be clear, this is the work product of the gentleman from Boone. I'm thankful he brought this to our attention. The amendment clears up what is apparently a loophole in the bill. The purpose of the bill, as you'll hear explained tomorrow, is to clarify the application of the Ethics Act. This amendment makes clear that the Ethics Act will also apply to persons who are, quote, given the authority to act on behalf or instead of an elected or appointed public official. That's the amendment, Mr. Speaker. I urge adoption of it. Thank you.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the question for the House is the adoption of the amendment. All in favor of adoption will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? Not the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4451, creating the West Virginia Sentencing Commission.
Are there amendments? Not to bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4511, modifying bail requirements.
Are there amendments?
No.
Not to bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
House Bill 4617, clarifying where a charge of DUI may be brought against an individual.
Are there amendments? Not to bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4618, relating to the authority of the Division of Protective Services.
Are there amendments? Not to bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
House Bill 4625.
Jump to the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to place the bill at the foot of all bills on the calendar.
The gentleman from the 58th asks unanimous consent that House Bill 4625 be placed at the foot of all bills on the calendar. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill will be placed at the foot of all bills on the calendar. Bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2843, permitting Class 3 and Class 4 municipalities to be included in the West Virginia Tax Increment Act.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2983, granting priority to roadway construction, reconstruction, and maintenance for roadways prone to recurring floods that hinder ingress and egress.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 4219, permitting employees of educational services cooperatives to participate in the state teachers retirement system.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4241, transitioning foster children into managed care.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4289, relating to disability pensions of municipal employees.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4347, relating to voluntary contributions to the West Virginia State Police Forensic Laboratory Fund.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4502, adding the crimes of murder and armed robbery to the list of offenses for which a prosecutor may apply for an order authorizing interception.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4542, allowing public service districts to accept payment by credit card.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4607, establishing certain criteria for the restricted operation of drones within state parks, forests, and rail trails.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4619, relating to supporting implementation of comprehensive systems for teacher and leader induction and professional growth.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 4624, relating to West Virginia coordinate systems.
Bill be advanced. Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, subject to announcements, I move the House stand in recess until 5:30 p.m. this evening.
Are there announcements?
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 58th.
Mr. Speaker, the Rules Committee will meet at 5:15 behind the chamber. Rules Committee at 5:15.
The gentleman from 64th, Doggett Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on Finance will meet today at 2 p.m. and the agenda is posted.
Gentleman from 35th, Doggett Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to check the availability of the chamber for 8:30 tomorrow.
Chamber is available.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So tomorrow morning at 8:30, this is an invitation to all members to hear from the Secretary of our Corrections on House Bill 4338, also known, I guess, as a reorganization of our corrections. This bill has been through Judiciary. It's in House Finance right now, due to come up on the agenda either tomorrow or Friday. There's a lot of questions, and so truly we need the members here to ask those questions of the Secretary and his staff, so that we all can be as educated as possible before that bill not only hits House Finance Committee, but before it comes to the floor. 8:30 tomorrow in the chamber. All members, please come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from 33rd, Doggett Hanshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce a caucus of the Republican members of this House at 5 p.m. in this chamber this evening. Thank you.
John from 51st, Doggett Statler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 2 p.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda is posted.
John from 27th, Doggett Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Judiciary Committee will resume consideration of the posted agenda at 2:15 this afternoon. And in view of the meeting called by the Chairman of Finance tomorrow morning, we will not meet tomorrow morning, but we will meet tomorrow afternoon following the floor session. And please pay attention to the announcements during the floor session.
John from 27th, Doggett Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the Government Organization Room. Republican members of the committee will caucus in the Chairman's office at 1:30. Thank you.
John for 30 seconds, I'll get fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your subcommittee, Judiciary Subcommittee on House Bill 4204 will resume today, 2 o'clock, in the Judiciary Room.
John for the 50th, I'll get Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats will caucus today at 4:30 in room 252. Democrats will caucus today, room 252 at 4:30.
John for 13th, I'll get Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The West Virginia AFL-CIO will have a labor caucus immediately following this session in room 215E, government organization, and lunch will be provided.
Further announcements. If not, the question before the House is the motion by Jones 58th to House stand at recess until 5:30 p.m. All in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The House is adjourned until 5:30 p.m. They're adjourned recess until 5:30 p.m.